Hello and welcome. Today we would discuss the question paper of the first year paper European Classical Literature. Now, mostly the pattern is like this, and I would be sharing a past year question paper. And this is to just to give you an idea of the various questions and the kind of questions that you can prepare before the exam. And often for first year students or for second year students as well, sometimes the kind of questions that are going to be asked in the exam becomes a big challenge. So students need some help in this aspect. So let me go over the questions one by one. So the first part of the question paper has internal choice, and if you notice the entire question paper, you have questions of weightage 10, 15 and 20, and there's always an internal choice. So you would if you are answering, for instance, a question on Antigone, the second question which is given as a choice is also from Antigone, right? So that way the question paper is very balanced, and all the sections covered in the syllabus would be a part of the exam question paper as well. I have introduced the syllabus also in a different video. If you want to look at that video before you come to the question paper, you should do that. Okay, so you should know the syllabus before I look at the question paper with you. Now let us go over the questions one by one. So the first question, or the first few questions, are short notes on the various characters or various aspects or various symbolisms of the plays that you cover in your syllabus. So you have questions from Antigone and Lysistrata. So let me go over the first question, which is questions on Antigone, Lysistrata, then description of one of the aspects of Odyssey. Then you have discussion about Creon's Hermertia, Antigone's Hermertia. Then you have questions about criticism of war. You have also questions about Telemachus's travels to Pylos, Sparta. Then you also have questions on Aristotle's understanding of epic. And towards the end, you notice that these are general questions. You need to know all the parts of the syllabus in order to answer the last two questions. You have Aristotle uh, and Aristotle's understanding of Odyssey, or Aristotle's understanding of Antigone and Lysistrata. So this is the last questions in the question paper are typically the questions where you are expected to know two or three sections of the syllabus in order to answer that question well. Now, the first question of the question paper is write a short note on the chorus of Antigone, right? So the chorus of Antigone serves as unique, and it has a significant role to play in the play, in the tragedy, because it enhances the overall dramatic impact of the tragedy. The chorus of the Greek drama, you would already know that the chorus always has an important role when it comes to Greek tragedy, or when it comes to Greek forms of comedy as well. So it has a structural role to play. It introduces characters to you, and the chorus very often is the reflection of the moral insights and of the society at large. And it covers the collective identity of Theban elders who express their sentiments and concern about the city's people. Then throughout the things that they say as chorus members, they talk about the pivotal moments, the important moments in the play, and they talk about the moral dilemmas that the play also puts across towards the audience. So the main important aspects that the chorus highlights are the themes of fate, justice and divine order in Greek tragedy, and often these are emphasized through the characters itself, but the chorus is the one that highlights these characteristics to you. So the chorus finally not only provides emotional depth and a sense of unity, but also proves as the bridge between the character and the audience, and the poetic and the contemplative choral odes of a timeless reflection in the complexities of human nature and moral responsibility. Next question is on Ishmael in Antigone. Now, the character of Ishmael in Antigone, um, it's a character that grows over the play. You know, you start with Ishmael being a very docile character. She does not behave in the same way, she doesn't think the same way as Antigone, so it offers a contrasting role to Antigone, it offers a foil to Antigone. She is not strong willed, she is not defiant, but towards the end, as the play grows, as the tragedy grows, we slowly get to know that Ishmael and the character develops. She is first marked by her cautious disposition. She doesn't want to defy the king. She is very, very cautious. She fears the consequences of defying the orders of the king, and she has the traditional beliefs that women are weaker and they should not be defying the authority of men. However, as I was saying, despite the initial hesitation, despite the fact that she initially doesn't want to support Antigone, she towards the end, by the end, she starts standing with Antigone, and shares her fate with Antigone. She's okay with what Antigone is doing. So her willingness to die alongside a sister also highlights the theme of loyalty and the power of familial duty. And we know, and here you can also talk about how Antigone represents the moral duty, familial duty, which is the symbolism of Antigone in the play. So through Ishmael, later on, we also see the broader societal aspects and how society also behaves towards certain people and towards certain situations in life. So when you have to finally sum up this answer, you can talk about how Ishmael is a foil to Antigone. She is initially afraid. She is initially afraid to go against the king. She wants to submit, but towards the end, she wants to finally support Antigone in her decisions. So this is how you would answer this particular question. The next question is a short note on the magistrate of Lysistrata. Now, some students would be confused about the magistrate, whether it's an important character, but actually it's a very important character because it is a character through which Lysistrata gets a lot of space to talk about her political and public opinions about what's happening in Greece and what's happening in the Peloponnesian War. The magistrate, comes across as a minor character, but when you look at the play, it does have a very large, important symbolism, and you should talk about that symbolism in this answer. So initially, you would talk about the fact that he has a number of exchanges with Lysistrata, which gives space to Lysistrata to talk about society. Whereas the magistrate himself is depicted as a pompous person. He is very self-righteous, he has very conservative opinions to share about women. He does not want to give any space to women, and that is highlighted in the play as well, and that is also supposed to engage the audience, make the audience laugh. So he draws, it is through this conversation that Lysistrata and magistrate have that Lysistrata is able to draw on the famous analogy of comparing the political situation of Athens with a bundle of wool. That is a very important analogy that Lysistrata draws in her discourse or in a dialogue with the magistrate. And the short-sightedness of the magistrate is a sharp contrast to the clarity of vision which Lysistrata has. Magistrate would have, very funny opinions. He would always talk with anger. He would never present a clear argument as Lysistrata is always able to do. So there is also a contrast between men and women and the behavior of men and women, which is depicted through the character of the magistrate. And therefore it makes us think through the stereotype that women should be at home and men are better at handling the polis. And through these characters we know that these stereotypes have something wrong about them. We start questioning these stereotypes about men being outside and women being at home. Magistrate clearly doesn't look like a person who would be a very sane person, who would be a very good decision maker, whereas Lysistrata comes across as a person who is very clear-headed. So it does question the stereotype about the ways men and women often should be behaving. And there are in the answer you can also go about the specific scenes in the play. So there are specific scenes where magistrate talks to men, that men have been too lenient to women. He and Lysistrata discuss the Peloponnesian War, and Lysistrata is able to tell how women are also affected by war. She explains to the magistrate that women have suffered because of the war, and they have lost their husbands. And there is also that's one insight, that one part of the play where women dress him up like a woman and mock him, and that is also to question the stereotypical behavior that men and women have. So it questions, with the help of magistrate we are able to question certain stereotypes. So this is the end of this particular answer. Next option is the depiction or the symbolism of Acropolis in Lysistrata. So the first thing that you would do in this particular answer is to talk about the fact that oikos and polis are two categories which have separate representations. The oikos represents the home and polis represents the outside world, and through the distinction between oikos and polis, then you talk about the Acropolis, and then you say that the Acropolis holds a symbolic influence as the physical representation of power, authority and political establishment in Athens. And throughout the play, the Acropolis is referred to as a place of political decision making. It is also supposed to be the embodiment of city's pride. And when women occupy Acropolis, they are they are finding ways to question men and question the authority that men have, and this is a subversive act. A subversive act is something which changes the power equations between two players, and here it is subversive because it changes the power equation between men and women. They are also in the Acropolis, they hold men hostage. The symbolism is therefore very clear in the play, that by holding off sex and holding off the power and money through the Acropolis is the same thing, because in both the acts the women are finally subverting the power equation. They are taking the power in their own hands. So you should be talking about the fact that there is a parallel between taking control over their bodies and taking control of the power of Acropolis. So they are taking control of both the aspects. So you can talk about these aspects of the play as well. So finally, in the Acropolis, traditionally women should be associated with oikos or the household, and men should be associated with the polis. But in Lysistrata, Aristophanes turns the tables and makes women take over Acropolis, thus questioning the traditional gender stereotypes or gender roles. So this is the answer of the question about Acropolis. Next question is about the description of Odysseus's journey to Circe's island. Now it is to describe, you just have to describe, you don't have to comment, but you can talk about the symbolism that Circe's island has, what does it represent, but mostly you have to describe what happens. So this is one of the simpler questions in the question paper. So when Odysseus and his crew land on Circe's island, they are welcomed and offered hospitality. However, Circe's intentions become evident when she uses her magical abilities to transform Odysseus's men into pigs, and Odysseus guides with his cunning and with his wit to manage to resist her and to be able to evade the kind of authority that she has. So Circe is, embodies the theme of transformation, of temptation, and of the blurred line between mortals and immortals. Circe is kind of a combination of mortality and immortality. Similarly, just like Circe is a symbolism of mortality and immortality combined, her island also represents reality and magic put together. So the line between reality and magic is blurred through the description of her island, and there is a complex relationship between divinity and humans, which is also talked about through Circe's depiction. Finally, what Circe does to Odysseus is that she makes him a more mature person. She gives him the challenges which he has to overcome through the help of his intellect, and despite being a hero, he becomes even a more seasoned hero by using his valuable knowledge and the guidance that he has through the guidance of the gods. So this is the answer to this particular question. Now the next question is also about Odyssey. The next question is about the role of Melanthius in Odyssey. Now if you remember, Melanthius is the disloyal, the treacherous character in the Odyssey. He is the servant who betrays Odysseus's household. He aligns himself with the suitors, and he also mistreats Odysseus. So he is basically he's disobeying the proper order of things, and he's also siding with the people who are against the empire. So he's a typical traitor, and that's the reason he is treated very badly towards the end of the epic. So Melanthius's behavior is also provocative, is also very, very important in the Greek world, because for the Greeks it is very, very important to have hospitality. The idea of hospitality or xenia is to show kindness and generosity to guests. But Melanthius does not inhabit that quality. He is disrespectful, he is disruptive, and this is a serious violation to the code of conduct in the Greek society. So that's the reason this defiance is very, very important in the character of Melanthius. And by helping the suitors in participating and the disruptive behavior in Odysseus' kingdom, Melanthius is seen to be defying a very important cultural norm, and he also represents the chaos and the disorder which is a part of Odysseus' kingdom when he was not there in the kingdom. So he represents various things. You have to talk about all these aspects when you talk about Melanthius' character in the Odyssey. The next question is about Antigone, and now these are slightly complex questions. You have to understand the questions. Very often students don't understand the question very well. Now in Antigone's martyrdom and Creon's downfall, discuss how Sophocles explores the tension that exists between the laws of the state and natural laws. Now this is the debate, the main debate that the play or the tragedy talks about. But at the same time, the debate between Antigone and Creon is not resolved. It does not give you a very straight or simple answer. It is for the audience to think through the complexities of the debate and decide for themselves which part of authority, which kind of authority they think is more important. Is moral authority important? Is moral law important? Is natural law important? Or are the laws of state more important? So these are the two aspects that the tragedy looks at, which Antigone as a tragedy looks at. Now we know that neither Creon nor Antigone is wrong. Antigone is acting as a sister who is bound by moral duty, but Creon is also thinking seriously about his role in the society as a king, and for him it is important to have social harmony. So neither of the two are wrong. Creon is a ruler of Thebes, and as a ruler he has to ensure that the rules are treated taken by everyone seriously, and Antigone is not above the law, and that is that is an edict that Creon goes by. He also knows that if he that his order against the burial of the brother of Antigone is important, because if that does not happen, there will be civil war and people will be unhappy with the king, and his authority will not mean anything to them. So he wants to maintain political harmony, political peace, and for that, not burying Polonius is important. On the other hand, Antigone is driven by a sense of duty towards her family name, and towards her brother, and therefore, as a sister, she cannot simply let her brother die without a decent burial. And we know that, burials are very, very sacrosanct even in a modern society like ours today. Imagine the kind of importance that it would have for a classical society, which is very, very dependent upon this relationship between God and humans. So burials had a very important place in Greek society, and she could just not have let gone her brother to die without a proper burial. So Antigone's defiance of Creon's order is a reflection of her belief in honoring her deeply held principles about life and family name, and she's also bound by moral and familial duty. So this exploration in the tragedy that we study in Antigone, this tension between the law of nature and law of the state is important, and it makes the play survive so many years, so many generations, so many centuries, because this is an ever relevant debate. Morality versus law is an ever relevant debate, and that's the reason we we are still grappling with those questions in different forms even in the modern society today. So overall, you can talk about the idea of individual ethics versus collective responsibility, and the fact that it is not very simply resolved in the tragedy Antigone. Okay, now we look at the next question, which is discuss how Creon's hamartia involves him in suffering no less painful than the suffering that Antigone endures as a result of her own hamartia. Now this is also a slightly tricky question. Now notice that the question already gives you a thesis, and it asks you to prove that. You are not supposed to argue what you think, right? Whether you think so. But you're supposed to say that this is already true, and then you are supposed to talk about why. Okay? So first, in this particular question, you would talk about hamartia. You should know, by the way, what hamartia is in this particular paper. All these Greek concepts of the idea of hamartia, hubris, all that is very important. So you can first talk about the idea of hamartia. Hamartia is the fatal flaw that any character has, and very often heroic characters have one fatal flaw at least. So Creon's fatal flaw is his pride, or what you can call the hubris. Hubris means excessive pride, and that is the fatal flaw of Creon. So Creon's pride leads him to feel that he is the most important person, and this leads him to lose his family, and it also creates his own downfall. On the other hand, Antigone's unwavering commitment to divine law, for her respect to familial duty is the hamartia, is her fatal flaw, and that leads her to her downfall. So coming back to Creon's belief that he is infallible, Creon's pride. So because Creon has hubris, Creon has hamartia, the fatal flaw that he is infallible, that makes him very, very stubborn. He thinks that his order has to be obeyed by everybody at all costs, and therefore he does not realize that it will lead to the loss of his own son and is also his own wife. He also suffers gravely because he has to confront the fact that he has lost his family because of his stubborn attitude, and the fact that his pride completely blinds him. And we also know that the fact, he feels that the fact that he doesn't listen to his son, the fact that he disregards the opinion of the people who hold him close, that is also very, very important. Even for this generation, it is important that the children feel heard, right? And again, this is how this epic has survived for several generations, because this debate between Creon and his son, the fact that the son doesn't feel like he's listened to, takes him to the downfall as well. Okay, so that is the pride or the hubris that you have to talk about in terms of for Creon. And you have to also have to talk about Antigone's Hermotia, or her unwavering commitment to honoring the laws of God. And we know that both these characters suffer a downfall uh, for this part of the play. So in this part of this video, we will look at the next few questions from the question paper. We've been discussing the question paper. Now, we look at this question number 5. Discuss how the criticism of war in Lysistrata is also the criticism of patriarchy and the avaricious accumulation of wealth. And the question for choice against this one is that how does Lysistrata use comedy to provide a commentary on serious issues? Now let us look at what you can talk about in these two questions. Now to begin with, sometimes an opinion or a thesis is already given to you, and all you have to do is that you have to offer ways in which that opinion can be sanctioned, or that opinion can be substantiated. Okay, so discuss how the criticism of war in Lysistrata is also a criticism of patriarchy. So the question is already giving you an opinion, and you have to substantiate that opinion. So the very premise of this particular play is comedic. But in the process, we get to know that women have been facing hardships. Lysistrata tells the magistrate that she is kept quiet even though she knew that men have been taking wrong decisions, and this has been done in a comedic manner. The dialogue that Lysistrata uses, the what she says to the magistrate, it feels very simple. It feels like she's making fun of the situation, but actually when you think about it, she says that women have been perfectly capable of making very clear decisions, but they've never been considered seriously, they've never been taken seriously. And even while they knew what's happening in Greece, and the political situation in Greece isn't good enough, they were never taken seriously, right? So at the same time, it's questioning war, because women never wanted war. She also states in one of the dialogues, Lysistrata states that the war has been unuseful for the citizens, whereas some people are benefiting, illegally benefiting from war, and the state needs to get rid of them. So she has very, very clear vision. As Aristophanes in the play also addresses the issue that women have been subject to patriarchal conditioning in the very first scenes, where women do not want to come forward and fight yet. So in the very beginning, we get to see that women are also falling into that stereotype, but as the play progresses, we see increasingly that women are able to fight that stereotype, right? Yet as the play progresses, we see that women that the same women put up a very strong fight against men. The scene where men and women's groups battle against each other, it's a comic kind of a battle, and the women pour water over men. What does that symbolize? The fact that war needs to be reassessed and rethought of with a cooler temperament, and this cool temperament is to be symbolized by women. Okay, so women have never been considered, their opinion has never been considered, but a cool mind is needed, that is represented by women. In another scene, the magistrate is increasingly offended and threatened by Lysistrata's words, and he is abusive. He constantly keeps saying that, we've been giving too many liberties to women. And the magistrate tells Lysistrata that he cannot listen to a woman who wears a veil. And this is an obvious sign of women's inferiority. Lysistrata removes her veil and ties it around the magistrate, which again, as I said before in my discussion of the question paper, it changes the power equation, it subverts the power equation. And here too we see that although the nature of comedy is physical, there's a lot of physical action going on. A man is being dressed into women's clothes, people are laughing, people are pouring water, there are huge phalluses also. The props that I use are, this man will have a huge phallus and it's supposed to evoke laughter. But at the same time, certain stereotypes are also being fought. Women fight the stereotype that women are, and they say that, and they prove through the novel that women are perfectly capable of making decisions, good decisions through dialogue and discussion, but they've not been allowed to do so. And remember, there was another argument that I had made in my discussion of a different question. The fact that women are holding off sex from men, and they are also withholding the money from men, it's one and the same thing, because women are taking charge. So they are stopping men from the control over their bodies, and they are stopping men from taking control over the money, right? They are doing these two things simultaneously, and that goes together with fighting against the war, that is fighting against patriarchy by having control over men, and fighting against war by taking control of the money. That's an important point that you mentioned in this particular question as well. The other optional question for this particular question number 5 is, how does Lysistrata use comedy to discuss serious issues? The answers here would overlap, but the instances that you would give in this answer would be different. In the very premise of the play, it's put forward that the political decisions that have been always in the hands of the men, those political decisions are not right. Men have been irresponsible towards the larger good of people. The government officials have benefited because of war. And in one scene, Lysistrata also mentions how they need to get rid of war. So the big message that Aristophanes is giving through the play is that even though the play is using a lot of physical comedy, as I had said, the bigger message that Aristophanes is giving in the play is that if the city-states of the Greek civilization keeps fighting against one another, bigger enemies like the Persian Empire will take over. And actually, this is what happened. If you read the history of the Greek Empire and the Persian Empire, this Peloponnesian War was the catalyst that led to Greece becoming more and more poor over the ages, and other enemies, other city-states becoming powerful, and finally the entire civilization goes down. So the larger takeaway, even though he's talking about the fact that sex is being withheld, men are desperate, they are all in need of sex, they are all hounds, and women are also playing a part in being seductresses, etc. The larger point that is made through the play, even though it seems really bawdy, is the fact that you have to end war. It's not good for people. And when women get together, they are also talking about the fact that they've been suffering. In fact, Lysistrata talks about how women have not been able to get married, they've not been able to become have a normal life because the war doesn't end. So the critique of war continues through the play. And it is important because this play is not just a vulgar play, it is also a political satire, because it does interweave many historically or geographically accurate places which have had wars. So if you read this play carefully, the Aristophanes mentions real places, it mentions real instances, and talks about genuine people, real people who have been a part of the Greek civilization. So it's not just a figment of reality, it's not just a part of fiction. It does have a figment of reality. You have to look at those aspects to understand this as a political commentary, as a satire as well. And the play also includes scenes where women share stories of suffering, hardships. All those parts are also shared in the in the story. And the chorus of old men and women, old men exchange humorous battle of insults, but beneath this, they are constantly abusing each other. They are using metaphors to put each other down. But finally, what is the outcome of that discussion that they have? That the cost of war is human, right? So even though the comedy, the nature of comedy is also very physical, he uses comedy, but finally he discusses serious issues. Now let's look at the next question. Next two questions are from Odyssey. Describe Telemachus's travel to Pylos and Sparta, and the option against this one is the use of epic conventions in the Odyssey. Now these are simple questions. All you have to do, you do not have to take a stand, you do not have to defend an opinion, you have to describe what you read. So my advice to you would be that from Odyssey you should at least know of all characters. You should be able to talk about all characters, because it's a huge text. It may be difficult for students to remember all characters, but it's important for you to be able to recall. For instance, what happens to Telemachus? All your focus is on Odysseus, right? But you will have to work on other characters as well, just in case a question comes in your exam. So the question is, what happens to Telemachus? Describe Telemachus's travel to Pylos and Sparta. So Telemachus departs from Ithaca to visit Pylos, where he meets the king and he witnesses grand sacrifices, participates in hospitality. This is how he gets to know how huge empires are. Then he visits King Nestor. He now gets to know how his father had great leadership quality. He had a great valor. He was a great warrior. And he gets to know how his father was very, very brave. Then he goes to Sparta. He meets Menelaus and Helen, and they also tell about his father's heroic exploits. Now he gets to know so much about his father, so much about the heroism of the father. Finally, here he also gets to know that the father is alive and he's still captivated. He's still captured in the island of Calypso, and that's what leads to moving the epic moving further. He will now think of getting his father to return to the kingdom. So the important part about Telemachus's travel to Pylos and Sparta is also that they provide the crucial information about Telemachus's father, but they also show him the complexities of heroism. He gets to know how great empires work. He gets to know more about relationship. He gets to know more about leadership, right? And that's how he changes from being a young boy, being a very young boy, to being a mature adult. Okay, so this is how you would answer this question. Next question, use of epic conventions in Odyssey. Now if you are reading any kind of classical literature, your understanding of epic convention has to be to the point, to T. You have to remember all the epic conventions, because if you're reading any epic, this particular question, this kind of question is a favorite of most question paper setters. So I'll just read out what are the epic conventions here. The invocation and the muse. You would know that epics begin with an invocation, with a divine inspiration that leads to the creation of this great work. Then it starts in the middle, which we call it in medias res. So you don't know where it begins. It's actually, the story is from the middle. The part of the story is already happened when the story starts being told to you. Then you have an epic hero. Here the epic hero is Odysseus. But in various epics you've had different epic heroes, like Achilles is supposed to be one of the heroes of the Iliad. right? So here Odysseus, of course, it's Odysseus. So Odysseus is the hero. He possesses great courage. He's very intelligent. He's very resourceful. He's a wise man. He's he's a great warrior as well. And all these qualities are important for the Greek civilization. Next, you have, it's a vast setting. The setting of every epic is vast. It has a great geographical expanse. Very often it covers several continents together, and this is, various it just adds to the level of adventures that they have. Then you have epic similes. Epic simile is where every object is described in such grandeur, in such detail, and very often comparisons are made from the natural world to the divine world, right? Then you have archetypal characters. What's an archetypal character? Where you have certain traits in certain characters which have a very important resonance throughout the epic, right? So you have certain characters, like you have certain traits which would continue in that particular character through the text, through the epic, right? Then you have epic catalogs. You will have great details about all characters, so many backstories, who is whose brother, what happened in there 20 years ago, what is the history of whichever character. You would know everything. So that is epic epic catalog. You would know a lot of detail. You get a lot of detail in the epic. Then the hero's journey, which is again very understandable when you talk about Odysseus's journey. Odyssey is all about Odysseus's journey. Then you have divine interventions, which means the worlds of the gods and the worlds of the mortals are very often overlap, and there is definitely divine intervention in many epics. Finally, you have epic battles and confrontations. The world of gods, as I said, very often confronts the worlds of mortals. So you have epic confrontations, you have epic battles, you have dramatic battles where gods are helping humans, etc., etc. So these were the epic conventions. Last two questions. The next question is, examine Aristotle's understanding of epic in relation to Odyssey. Now this is something that I want to talk about. When you have the last questions, very often these questions are about your knowledge and understanding of the entire paper, not just that text. So ostensibly this text is asking you about Aristotle, but see, it's also talking about Odyssey. So you need to know definitely about Odyssey as well as Aristotle in order to answer this question. Now Aristotle, since the question is examine Aristotle's understanding of epic in relation to Odyssey. And so in this particular case, when you talk about Aristotle's work, Poetics, so you first mentioned where did Aristotle talk about all these opinions. Then you start talking about what are the conventions, what are the characteristics he associates with the epic. One thing that he says definitely about the epic is that a tragedy and an epic are supposed to replicate reality. They are supposed to be about human life. It should evoke emotions like pity and fear, and it should also have something to learn for people. It should also inspire admiration and wonder. So it should be an imitation of reality, and the purpose of epic is that it should be able to communicate, it should be able to resonate with the common people. Then there is unity of action. By unity of action, we mean that whatever actions are going on are not disconnected from each other. So for instance, if we take the example of Odyssey, all the episodes which happen finally take the main narrative forward, which is Odysseus's journey from the war to home, okay, and that's the journey that Odysseus has to make. Then you have heroic character. Odysseus possesses extraordinary characters, and Aristotle also emphasized to a great extent on the character and the development of the character. Then you have emotional impact and catharsis. So although he is talking about catharsis in the context of plays and tragedy, but even in in an epic, catharsis would relate to how all the emotions are purged, and finally you get a release from all emotions. Then you have unity of time and place, you have noble language and style, you have importance of plot and character, purpose, didactic function. So what you do here, you take up all the edicts, all the characteristics that Aristotle has given, and talk about how each of them relates to the Odyssey. The challenge here would be that you should have a clear understanding of Aristotle and Aristotle's work. Now, the next question is, on the basis of your reading Sophocles' Antigone and Aristophanes' Lysistrata, comment on your understanding of tragedy and comedy while commenting on the difference between the two. Now, again, you need to know Lysistrata, you need to know Antigone in order to answer this question. Okay, so then you have to justify how the aspects that he underlines as aspects of tragedy and the aspects that he underlines as aspects of comedy, how they are different and how they are similar, and whether they are similar to each other. So the first thing that we talk about is tragedy. Through Antigone, we get to know that tragedy delves into serious and weighty themes. It focuses on human flaws, complexities of human nature. It talks about laws of honor. It talks about laws of the body. It talks about morality. All these questions are important, right? So it also discusses, more importantly, it also discusses the inevitability of suffering, of fate, and it evokes emotions of pity and fear in audience as they witness the tragic hero's struggle against external forces, which is a stock characteristic of a tragedy. And on the other hand, Lysistrata, or a comedy or a satire, is supposed to exaggerate reality in order to be able to critique social norms and institutions. And in this play, so you give some brief premise of both the plays because this is a longer question. So in this play, you would talk about how women decide to put an end on war by withholding sex from men in order to maintain peace. So comedy challenges the conventions of a human life, of everyday normal life, through laughter and through subversion. Comedy provides a perspective of human follies, and Lysistrata engages in social and political critique, while using exaggerated characters, witty dialogues, and playful situation to entertain people. Now, the difference between, since the question asks you what is similar and what is different, don't skip a part of the question because that would also have a separate weightage. The evaluator will look at whether you've answered both the parts of the question. So don't forget to answer the second part of the question. The second part of the question talks about whether these are different. So tragedy evokes catharsis. It leads to purging of emotions, it brings empathy, it brings fear, it brings a greater understanding towards human suffering. However, comedy prompts laughter and critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is important for you to mention in a question like that. What is the contribution of this comedy? Is it only for people to have fun, come sit for 15-20 minutes or for 1 hour? Watch the play and go home. Are they supposed to take anything home? Yes, because it enables people to think critically. So the tragedy presents individuals trapped in a grip of destiny, while comedy allows characters to challenge norms and create change. In tragedies, often, characters are trapped. They would work on a given tangent. They will not be able to move around that. Whereas in comedy, the characters are already exaggerated and they are able to also challenge social norms. So finally, you mentioned that two of these genres coexist and are complementary to each other, and they talk about both are important for having just reflections on human experience. So this is my discussion of the entire question paper, all the questions which are asked in the latest question paper of European classical literature. Do let me know if you like this video, if you would want me to discuss the question papers of any other papers which are being offered by any university. Please do let me know. I would be happy to discuss and help. Thank you so much. I'll see you again for another video.